Hello everyone, we are on Chapter 8, and Chapter 8 marks the second half of Philosophy of Freedom. The first half covers the knowledge of freedom, so that includes his theory of knowledge and how we know, and that is the first part of understanding freedom. The second half of this book deals with the reality of freedom, so it's more about the practical aspects of freedom, and it helps us to make practical the knowledge of freedom he's given us in the first half of the book. I'm going to get started, but before I do, I'll just mention that the second half of the book was something our group did not summarize together, but what I'll be sharing with you guys is the work that I've done on my own, and hopefully my own summaries are adequate enough. So I'm going to get started on paragraph 1, and that's probably all we'll get to for today's session. Okay, it's paragraph 1. Let us recapitulate what we have achieved in the previous chapters. The world faces man as a multiplicity, as a mass of separate details. One of these separate things, one entity among others, is man himself. This aspect of the world we simply call the given, and inasmuch as we do not evolve it by conscious activity, but just find it, we call it percept. Within this world of percepts, we perceive ourselves. This percept of self would remain merely one among many other percepts. If something did not arise from the midst of this percept of self, which proves capable of connecting all percepts with one another, and therefore the sum of all other percepts with the percepts of our own self, this something which emerges is no longer merely percept, neither is it, like percepts, simply given. It is produced by our own activity. To begin with, it appears to be bound up with what we perceive as our own self. In its inner significance, however, it transcends the self. To the separate percepts it adds ideally determined elements, which, however, are related to one another, and are rooted in a totality. What is obtained by perception of self is ideally determined by this something in the same way as are all other percepts, and is placed as subject, or I, over against the objects. This something is thinking, and the ideally determined elements are the concepts and ideas. Thinking, therefore, first reveals itself in the percept of the self. But it is not merely subjective, for the self characterizes itself as subject only with the help of thinking. This relationship in thought of the self to itself is what in life determines our personality. Through it we lead a purely ideal existence. Through it we feel ourselves to be thinking beings. This determination of our life would remain a purely conceptual, logical one. If no other determinations of ourself were added to it, we should then be creatures whose life was expended in establishing purely ideal relationships between percepts among things and between them and ourselves. If we call the establishment of such a thought connection an act of cognition, and the resulting condition of our self-knowledge, then assuming the above supposition to be true, we should have to consider ourselves as beings who merely cognize or know. So paragraph 1 is summarized as follows. Thinking is produced by our own activity and connects all percepts with one another, including our percept of self. Through thinking, we lead a purely ideal existence. So basically, this first paragraph, he's just summing up many of the things he talked about in the first half of the book, which is namely the activity of thinking helps us to understand the world. Okay, so he's pointing out that in this paragraph, thinking is an activity that we produce ourselves, and that because of thinking, we are able to recognize ourselves as subject amongst other percepts. We can distinguish ourselves as separate from the other percepts. He also points out thinking is composed, thinking leads to the creation of concepts and ideas. And he's alluding to the end that we're more than just ideal characters, ideal beings. The conceptual world is a very important part in our personality, but again, he's just pointing out that we're more than just ideal beings who live in the realm of ideals and thoughts. So that's what he's talking about in this paragraph. So that's all for today. So we're going to try and cover some more in the next session. So if you have any questions or comments, just send me a message, okay? So have a good day. Bye.